Hello, I'm Emily Rutherford-Liska, and I'm back with this segment of the Jacksonville History Show. I happen to be Executive Director of the Jacksonville Historical Society, and Jacksonville Historical Society sponsors this show. And we have for you today just such a fascinating guest, Rosie Kostandarithes. Kostandarithes. I have it, I'm going to say it several times. And you have become interested in a topic that's just absolutely fascinating and not delved into by too many area researchers. And this is the topic of the North Florida, Jacksonville, Florida in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, when finally the common man could make their way down to Florida by their own auto power, not relying on the dollars to come by train or by boat, as tourists had done in the late 19th century or early 19th century. Suddenly, everybody could, or everybody with a little money could afford an automobile. Let's talk about that for a minute. How you got interested? Start there.
Well, I got interested in it because I started collecting old postcards of motels. I'm not a native Jacksonvillian, and I became interested in that, and then I started wondering if these buildings were still there, and I saw that a lot of them were still there. And I was interested in why it was that there were so many of them built along certain roads, and then that got me interested in the whole U.S. highway system and development of tourism in Florida on a 20th century middle class basis. As you know, Florida has always been a huge tourist destination, but prior to the 20th century it was more for wealthy people.
And it's so funny because it was the 1920s, into the 1920s, before roads were actually numbered. Before that, they sort of had names like the highway from Canada to Miami and the Atlantic Coast Highway. And suddenly that highway evolved into the very first numbered highway, which was, well, US 1.
Right.
Yeah.
Before the Federal Highway Act was passed in 1921, roads were a local concern. They were just kind of pieced together. And when that federal act was passed, that's when a gasoline tax was levied to develop these roads, because people had access to automobiles for the first time. You know, the middle class, people could afford them. They wanted to travel. They didn't want to be encumbered by train schedules, which, you know, steamship schedules, which was the only way you could travel in those days. So they got in their cars and they went, and they were limited only by the quality of the roads that they had to travel on. So after the 20s particularly, there were a lot of people driving into Jacksonville on the U.S. highways. And of course they had to have some place to stay, and that is where the motel industry developed.
And I'm going to start, this isn't exactly a posh hotel, this is sort of some palmettos out in the woods.
That's probably, even though you can't see a car, my guess is he's got one somewhere.
Okay.
The earliest tourists would drive their cars and they would camp on the side of the road, they would have tents, they would bring their food with them, and from just camping in the open ground like that, they would eventually start paying farmers to camp in their fields, and that is how the original motels sprang up. The more enterprising farmers realized they could charge money for this, they could build structures that people would be willing to pay for more, and so you have a picture there of
let's see, I may go to one a little too sophisticated. Let's see, is this one workable?
Well, probably the other one.
This one? Okay, let's show another little.
That would be the White House Motor Court. That was on Highway 90. It's one of the very earliest tourist camps, as they were known initially. You can see it's a single structure. It has a garage that was added on later. That was an amenity that they could charge extra for. And these popped up in people's fields. They just realized there was more money in renting to people like that than there was in you know, planting crops. And they had to get people in with the tile bathrooms and that sort of amenities. But they used postcards as a cheap way to advertise. They made those available to their guests, who would use them to mail home to their family, and of course now we collect them.
Now that was Highway 90, but boy, once the people saw the hordes of automobiles rattling down US 1, suddenly all the little motel, what do you call them, motels? Any other names you give them?
the term motel actually dates from 1926. These probably predated that slightly. The early motel design, they were called tourist camps, tourist courts. They were single building dwellings in a circle, semicircle, or a U or something like that. And that, what you have there is a postcard. It's two separate postcard views of the same property, just later on. Now, these are very old, and they're still standing, partially on the north side of town on Highway 1, Kings Road.
Right. And do you remember ever staying in that type of structure? I do too. I do too. You know, family trips.
Groovy, for lack of a better word.
I just didn't. I didn't think about it. You know, I'm older than you, so I just thought, well, this is what it is, and I still remember eating in Louisiana at the Doo-Wah Diddy. I mean, I was a little, which was sort of quasi campsite, you know,
yeah, exactly.
roadside site.
Well, they were mom and pop fixtures, right. and that's one that's in north of town on US 1. The building is still there, but it is abandoned, and there is a large royal blue sign that says motel that is facing north because it doesn't need to face south. It needs to face the people who are coming from Georgia, who will be you know, coming to look for a motel to stay as they get into the state of Florida. So that one is still there. That's an old one in postcard from the 30s.
Well, what a great observation as a person traveling through in the 20s, 30s, 40s. Today may be curious, but you as a scholar pick right up on it. In fact, you actually, I want to mention this, you're a practicing nurse by trade,
yes.
And you decided at some point to pursue a degree in, a graduate degree in history.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I started out, well, I wanted to indulge my curiosity in history, so I got a history degree from UNF. Started on graduate school, but have not finished as of yet.
And still nursing full time.
Oh, yes.
Yes,
yes, doing that too.
And I have another image here that you brought.
That is what the prior image that you showed, the dual postcard, that is what it looks like now. Those buildings are still there, and it's deserted, as you can see. But they really are architecturally significant because they're so early and there's so few of them left.
And some of them do get uses. For example, the one just south, well, in Bayard.
Bayard, exactly.
A little north of St. And we don't have a photo, but you can, most people are familiar with this.
I think people, yeah, it's an antique place. There's a bunch of little cabins, and they're all separate. I'm told that even as early as the 30s, it was being used for naughty purposes.
Oh my!
Because you know, when you have four walls and a roof and a bed, it's not just going to be tourists who are interested. And that's a lot of these mom and pop establishments would have signs out saying "No locals" for that reason, to try to keep that out.
How interesting. Do not recall that aspect. I'm delighted to tell you. We're going to show one more, and.
That's a motel that is still standing, and it is very, very close to that one that you just showed the picture of. Again, it's two views, different ownership, you know, same motel. It was most recently used as an assisted living facility, which a lot of these, by virtue of the way they're constructed, they don't lend themselves to a lot of different uses. It's some sort of residence. So it's not in use right now, but the sign is still up saying that it's an assisted living facility.
And chronologically, that one really dates more to the 40s. Some of the others to perhaps the late 20s, early 30s, and even into the 50s. And it's so interesting. I mean, people should realize US 1, part of that in town, as you talked about earlier, part of it you come in through Kings Road, then Kings Avenue, and then it, of course, becomes what we would really know as Phillips Highway, US 1, and that's just filled with all these old motels offering service at one time to the travelers who used to come down that road.
Right.
I have one more image I want to show that I think a lot of local people will relate to, and a lot of people as well as tourists jaunting by in the 40s, 50s enjoyed a meal here. Oh, let me get it straight. This is the wonderful, Rosie, you know what this is. Go ahead.
Beiser's Restaurant on the south side. There are lots and lots of postcards out there advertising Beiser's. Even if it wasn't attached to a motel, they would still advertise with postcards.
And as a younger person in Jacksonville, my family didn't go out to dinner much, but that was one of the places we occasionally enjoyed dining. And I remember at a point they'd let you walk right into their kitchen. Well, today you have all these bistros where you can watch everything in the kitchen. In those days it was a little unusual.
The health department wouldn't like that today.
Well, you are going to speak at the Jacksonville Historical Society, and there you're even going to talk about some of the kitsch people would see along the roadside.
Yes.
Give an example of that.
Well, the alligator farm on US 1 north of town, obviously. That is not something that you would see anywhere but Florida. Alligators and Indian River fruit, that's not something you would confuse with any other state. And it was a uniquely Florida experience that you only got here. And this was the gateway to the rest of the state.
And I guess Oriental Gardens on the south side would have been another location that was, popular for tourists coming through.
Yes, until, was it the late 30s that was built over?
That sounds right, about that time. Well, but if people want to see you give your full presentation, and you're a lot of fun to listen to, and this is such a great topic.
Thank you.
You'll be at the Jacksonville Historical Society on Tuesday the 19th of April. We'll have a little reception at 6:30 and the program at 7. I believe you're going to put this on PowerPoint and
just expand on this a little bit.
And have fun with it, have a lot of fun with it. You know, what a lot of people don't realize is, one reason these automobiles were affordable is Henry Ford built his auto plant right here in Jacksonville, Florida. That was one of the auto plants, and that helped make this assembly line cars affordable. And today, that plant still stands only about 1.5 miles from where you're going to speak, right down on the St. Johns River by the Matthews Bridge. So your talk will be at Old St. Andrews, and we'll be so happy to have you there, home of the Jacksonville Historical Society. So I'll ask everyone to stay tuned. And Rosie, I want to thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Emily.
Delightful guest. And I want to thank everybody for listening tonight. And until next time, remember, we're history.